what do we do, when there's a disagreement, but they're both in the biblical realm on the, okay, so we look at the hierarchy of things, but then in that there's different interpreting of Scripture and all that stuff. And
so we're kind of getting into like, what do we do with different denominations and churches and doctrinal beliefs?
Right, and we've talked about that in past sermons and stuff, and we can go into that.
Yeah.
And this will probably be our last question today as we jump in. But just like we've less about denominations, although we can touch on that, but even just like disagreement in church is something we've talked about and heard about in one of our sermon series. I can't even remember which one now, but last year we talked about unity and how there's actually a lot more room for disagreeing on some things, but that doesn't mean people aren't biblical in their approach to stuff. And my question is specifically along the lines of what we've just currently been talking about on, okay, so there's these different attributes of God, and we're looking at this, and some people focus on some and the others, and we've pointed out that there's kind of a spectrum on looking at some of those things and coming up with these denominations or theologies. How do we apply, how do we be in unity with people who disagree with us on some of these things? What is that? What is that? How do we do that? Well, how would you speak to, us and say, here's how we do that well? Because we've touched on that, but I'm like, that could be 6 podcasts.
So we're talking about unity in the church, essentially, the wide church.
Mm-hmm. For those who are like, yes. Not on the spectrum, like it's obviously denouncing the gospel. Right. But we're here, and I can get more pointed in my question, but yes, we're talking about unity in the church. We have preconceived notions on that, what it is, what it isn't. And oftentimes it goes more in the thought process is, I don't agree with them, therefore they're categorically different than me.
Right.
But I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I guess I can share some thoughts, that I'm learning, and, maybe they'll be helpful and maybe they won't be. I think that one thing that's important for us to do as we mature is to learn to get clear for ourselves what conversation we're having when. Like, is this an in or out conversation? Yes. Or not? Like, not every doctrinal issue is in or out. You're Christian or you're not. Or you're a heretic or you're not.
That's key. I feel like that's key.
Yeah, so historically there's 12 things that are those things, and that's the Apostles' Creed.
Right.
That's just the universal confession of the church.
Yes. Beyond that.
So that's not that many things. 12 is not a lot.
Right.
So there's that. That's like, okay, the historic church has defined unity in the church as agreeing that all these 12 things are true.
Right.
Not 11 out of the 12, 12 for 12.
Yes.
That when you say you're a Christian, you are saying that you believe these 12 things. And if you don't believe any number of these 12 things, you can say you're a Christian, but you're not.
Right.
That's not Andrew saying that or Antioch or whatever. It's just, that's like everybody. That's the church.
Yes.
It's like, great. You can call yourself something, but that doesn't mean you're that thing.
Right.
So that's distracting to think about culturally right now.
Right.
Okay, anyways.
Because there's a lot.
Getting more focused. No, we're not going to go down. Okay. So
we'll get there one day.
Yeah, one day. So now I'm like, great. So those 12 things, like I heard somebody say, those are national borders.
Okay.
If you try to invade those borders, you're going to get the military.
Right.
That's a hill worth dying on.
Okay.
And worth dying for, as we look maybe more historic in the historic church. This is a national border thing. If you're going to ask me to give on this, you're going to have to shoot me for it.
Okay.
These aren't changing. These are non-negotiables.
Okay.
And I'll fight for these things.
Okay.
Period. And we all will.
Yes.
Like, I should be able to go knock on just about every church that's a church. I should be able to knock on their door and say, we've got to stand for these things. And people should be like, yeah, totally.
Yeah, let's do it.
We may disagree about tongues, but
right,
we're solid on the virgin birth.
Right.
Totally. This is important. And then everything from the great schism of the East and West, the Protestant Reformation, denominations, all of these sort of things. I know lots of people have lots of opinions on these things, but within all of those splits, there's the Apostles' Creed still stands. remarkably. I mean, it's amazing,
Right.
you know? And so now there's national borders, and then we get state borders and city and town and neighborhood and home.
These are the other
You
issues.
know, it's like things get more narrow in.
Okay.
And, you know, so national borders, like we're going to be in unity on the Apostles' Creed as far as you and I having the conversation of, are we both Christians?
Right.
Well, do we agree on these 12 things?
Yes.
Great. Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to, okay. We disagree on the next 114 things, but great, you know, here we are. So I think that's helpful for us to
really
understand.
helpful.
Yeah, it's like not everything is a hill worth dying on.
Right.
And so within the nation, there's a lot of room to live in different places and do things different ways and all of that sort of stuff. And so, there are priorities. And so we need to learn and grow and mature in knowing what fits where and what conversation are we having here.
Yes.
How important is this conversation?
Right.
And how much does it matter?
Yes.
And what are we even aiming for in the end here? So like,
That's a good
you could be
question.
having a conversation with somebody who's in a very different denomination, different church, different part of America. Let's say, let's get pretty different here.
Right.
Whatever that means. You know, let's get pretty different. And I can sit down with this person and say, let's have a theological discussion about X issue that you and I disagree on. It's like, okay, cool. But where are we ending? Where are we trying to end?
Right.
What are we trying? Are you trying to convince me? Okay, great. Let's have a debate about it. Are you going to go home tomorrow? Yeah. And I'm going to go back to my church and you're going to go back to yours?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's throw some ideas out and learn from each other here.
Right.
Because like nothing's going to change.
Right.
Or are we saying like, let's build a 24/7 prayer room together as churches interacting together? It's like, oh, wow. Okay. We're going to have a lot of conversations about that because there's a lot of things that go into like being able to build well together.
Right.
I can bless you as a brother and sister, but if we're going to build together, then like we're moving into each other's house now.
Yes.
And so there's like, you have more conversations with someone who lives in a house with you than a neighbor.
Yeah.
Or somebody who moves across town or whatever. It's like, people in whereverville, America, were like, yeah, they're Americans.
Right.
I don't really worry about it. But if you're saying like, hey, I'm going to come move into your house, it's like, oh,
I'm gonna start worrying
don't
about
just
it.
care that you're an American.
I'm going to start worrying about you.
Like we're going to talk about this,
Right.
if we're going to build life together. It's like, okay.
Yes.
And so, hey, at the end of the day, you got to live somewhere.
Yeah.
And like you got to go to church somewhere.
Right.
You don't go to every church, and that's fine.
Right.
And so that's where I talk about
man.
blessing other churches and all this stuff. Is like, hey, there's probably a lot more we agree on than we disagree on.
Yes.
And like a lot more and whatever. But at the end of the day, like you're trying to follow Jesus, I'm trying to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
I love you. I'm going to cheer you on because I'm going to do unto you as I would hope you would do unto me, which
Yes.
is I really want to love Jesus. I really want to grow. I want to stand righteous before him. I want to receive my eternal reward. And I'm going to
Yes.
assume that you want that too.
Yes.
And so what I could really use from you is not you talking mess behind my back. I could use you telling whoever other person, like, I think they
Yes.
have a heart for God and they're trying even though we disagree on some stuff.
Right.
So if that's what I would hope someone else would do for me, that's what I'm going to spend my life doing for other people.
Right. Yes. And if we've started with the national borders, the 12 things, ultimately they're a brother and sister.
Ultimately.
With the same
Right.
Father.
Yeah.
And choosing to see them as that. And lead and interact with them as brothers and sisters first. Like I wouldn't go up to one of my brothers or sisters and instantly just calling out everything that's wrong with them.
Yeah. Or if you would, we wouldn't call that a healthy family. That's for
right,
sure.
Exactly. I was going to say there have probably been times I'm the older brother. I would
Yeah.
do that to my sister, but ultimately, no. A brother and a sister spur one another on. Like we're in this together. Yeah, there's differences.
Right.
But we're ultimately a brother and sister.
Right.
With the same Father. And so I want to see you as that. And that's what you're talking about, the believing the best. And that's really helpful. Yeah. And there's so much more we can get into on all of this, on inside the church, between churches, and then, what do we do about the ones who claim to be believers and aren't outside of the 12? We can get in all that later. But I think that's a great, just the borders thing is actually really practical.
I find it really helpful.
Actually really helpful.
Yeah.
That's cool. I don't know if you take credit for that.
I do not.
Yeah. It's awesome, though.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, great. I mean, I'm
Thanks
thankful.
for the questions, Sam.
Absolutely. I'm thankful for time to sit down and ask them. We'll do it again soon.
Let's do it.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for watching.